al zurdo de mierda no le podés dar ni un milímetro.
Pero ¿me podés definir zurdo de mierda? Que no
Todos
lo
los que,
entiendo?
digamos, los colectivistas, los que ponen, digamos, o sea, esa idea... A ver,
¿Por qué le ponés de mierda, digamos?
Porque son una mierda. O sea,
vos mezclás...
no,
pero
es que si pensás, pero si pensás distinto te van a aniquilar. Ese es el punto. Es decir, vos al zurdo no le podés dar un milímetro, porque le das un milímetro y lo toma para destrozarte. Es decir, digamos, o sea, vos no podés negociar con el zurdo. No se negocia. No se negocia con esa mierda, no se negocia porque te van a llevar puesto. Si tienen un golpeador que caga trompadas a la mujer, digamos, si es de ellos, ¿me entendés? Se pone el pañuelito verde y grita todo el tiempo contra el neoliberalismo, lo ocultan. ¿Me entendés? O sea, si de repente hay alguien que acosó a una periodista que acosa a otra periodista, lo ocultan. Es decir, a todos los de ellos lo ocultan. Todas esas aberraciones la ocultan. Ahora, si vos estás del otro lado, a vos te van a estropear, te van a matar, te van a dar con lo que sea. No les importa arruinarte la vida. ¿Por qué? Porque no pensás como ellos. Y ¿sabés qué es lo bueno de todo esto? Hay algo bueno en todo esto. Porque como el error es humano, como todos nos podemos equivocar, ¿sabes qué nos obligan? Nos obligan a ser mejores. Y como estamos siendo tan mejores que ellos, como los estamos aplastando en la batalla cultural, los estamos pasando de arriba, porque no solo le ganamos en lo productivo, somos superiores moralmente, somos superiores estéticamente, somos mejores en todo. Y les duele, les duele. Entonces, como no pueden pelear con las herramientas legítimas, se apalancan en el aparato represivo del Estado, poniendo torres de guita para hacernos mierda. Y aún así no pueden, tuvieron que bajar la nota, ¿Me entendés? Que están perdiendo, están desesperados, están perdiendo la batalla cultural, los zurdos de mierda, por primera vez se ven acorralados.
Tipo y deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera, aunque te resistas. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación, afuera. Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social, afuera. Ministerio de Educación, adoctrinamiento, afuera. Ministerio de Transporte, afuera. Ministerio de Salud, afuera. Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, afuera. Se acabó el curro de la política. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
You not watching this video? Afuera! Javier Milei elected in Argentina. Afuera! I got some stuff to say on this, obviously as a self-modelled AnCap. Well, first of all, let's say Javier Milei has been elected by the people in a democracy in Argentina, and he's saying he's an AnCap, which is a variation on libertarianism. But he's not that, for obvious reasons, like the ones I've just said. For me, it is my contention that a true libertarian and a true AnCap both want zero government. Javier Milei has been elected via the process of democracy, which, when it's working and not rigged, which is hardly ever these days, but apparently it's working in Argentina, puts a leader in place, an authority, a state, a government, in a position of power, a sort of a throne at the top, as a slave master, ruling over people primarily by the method of taxation. How does government do anything? Is taxation. And you'd say, how does government do anything? Well, it's force, because they have the official army and the police, and they can enforce the laws that they create via, the government creates laws, that's its primary purpose. So anything that's in law is created by the government. You've seen all these authoritarian hate speech laws, like the one they did Dankula for, and the ones they keep bringing in Scotland and in Ireland because of the Dublin riots. These psychotic governments. Anyway, governments are never your friend. They're authoritarian in general. It doesn't matter who sits at the seat of power. They're all essentially going to do the same thing to you. So the goal of AnCaps and libertarians, at least true ones, from my perspective, is to remove government and have the public govern themselves. Now, that's not what's happened in Argentina right now. We've got Javier Milei. He does say a lot of libertarian ideology. He does, if you look at, there's a channel you can look at, there's a Twitter account you can look at. The search function is trash, especially when you're on mobile. It just misses half the keys you're pressing. Ah, yes. So if you want Javier Milei's main account, although you might not understand it unless you speak Spanish or Argentinian. I don't know if do they speak Spanish in Argentina, or do they speak an Argentinian variation of Spanish, so you have to learn specifically Argentinian. Anyway, if you know Argentinian, go to @jmilei. That's Javier Milei's actual account. Obviously the J is silent, so that's @JMILEI. If you want to hear him translated into English, which is more appropriate for me and people who can't speak Spanish very well, you go to Milei Explains. So that's @MILEI_explains on Twitter, and that's a very useful little resource for most people to understand what the hell is going on, especially as pertains to Javier Milei's policies over there. He does know a lot about what he's talking about. Fuck knows how he got elected over there, that the globalists didn't step in. It's quite possible that, you know, this is a trick, and the reason he got into power is because the globalists let him into power, like they have some sway over him, so it's good to be skeptical. But, you know, he's quite based in a lot of the stuff he says. He's got one or two videos, the video where he's talking to a journalist on TV, and he's got the proper passion and aggressiveness, and he's like calling the left shit leftists. That's a hilarious video that you should watch. There's also another video which I referenced at the start of this, which is the afuera meme. Afuera either means gone or out. I'm not 100% sure. It's either gone or out. And he's got a board full of the government ministries that operate in the Argentinian government. Like over here in England, you would have like the Home Office and the the Department or the Minister of the Treasury, or I think you got these positions for the top government officials surrounding the Prime Minister and what they're in charge of, like writing the budget or something. And you have that in Argentina as well. But like in the UK, there are these far left extremist, social justice, activist ministries that have come in. So we're in the second dark age. We're in 1984, basically. You've got the Ministry for Equalities. You've got like ministries for gender and social and stuff like this. Ministry for the Environment. You've got bullshit like this, which is socialism. And Javier Milei, from everything he said, he's dead set against socialism. More on that later. So, for the most part, he seems like, and how he models himself is like an anti-communist, which is a good thing, but he's not an anti-statist or AnCap, although he has a route to being a real AnCap via removal of everything that makes up the government, including eventually removal of taxation, fully arming the populace, and removal of himself and his party, by stepping down and leaving a void in its place. That's the route he has to becoming an AnCap if he really was serious about becoming one. But he knows as well as I know, I'm sure, that he is now the president. He's the ruler, essentially. He is the state. AnCap is about removal of the state. And so is libertarianism, in my opinion. If you still want the state, but you've got libertarian-ish ideals, if you're an atheist, you're a classical liberal, and if you're not an atheist, you're a conservative, maybe a mild conservative. Yeah. And I would say that Milei, because he's Catholic, I think, I would say he's more of a mild conservative, in effect, because he is part of the state now, he is government. But he's saying he's an AnCap, and he's pushing a lot of libertarian thought out there, and he knows what he's talking about when he says it. A lot of the stuff he says, especially go on Milei Explains Twitter, is very based as in, when I say based, I'm not talking about right-wing based, I'm talking about grounded. He knows what he's talking about. Grounded in terms of my ideology. He knows a lot of libertarian stuff about the economy and how the state will fuck with you, and how if you get rid of stuff like welfare, it will be good, and if you remove taxation, it will be good. All these things, like about self-governance and stuff, is what he appears to be for. There's some dodgy stuff that I'll try and get out of the way right now. I was very happy to see this guy in a skeptical kind of way, because I know he's not an AnCap. But as soon as I saw the Afuera video, I was like, shit, maybe, and I saw a few more videos, maybe he's actually going to get rid of all these government ministries. And I think he's almost just about to get rid of like the gender and feminism ministry first, which is pretty cool. And if he gets rid of all the government ministries, and then if he ends taxation, if he keeps on taking steps to like taking away government power, like one of the things he's doing is removing Argentina's central bank, which people think he'll get assassinated for. Because that's like another thing that's in the way of freedom. So that if he removes that, then wow. And if he keeps going, like, I'm going to remove this. Like, he keeps going, he's got his board and he's going, afuera, afuera, afuera. If he goes further than government ministries, if he just removes pieces out of government and supplies public with the means, essentially guns and arms laws, constitutional Second Amendment like they have in America, then the public have the ability to dictate themselves, and they gain more and more power over the government the more they're given guns and the less taxes there are. Actually, there should be no taxes at all of any kind. You'd be astonished at the amount of different taxes that people have to pay. Like, there's inheritance tax. Like, if your parents die and you think you're going to inherit what they give you in your deeds or your will, no, that's not true. The government takes a huge cut of that, and you don't see it. Even if your parents bequeath it to you, it goes to the government. That's a horrible one. Then obviously you've got VAT, which is value-added tax that appears on food, especially luxury goods, luxury foods, which is things like chocolates and other things. You get tax obviously on road tax, you pay tax for when you drive a car, you pay tax obviously through your income tax is the main one. You know, you pay tax, that's the one everyone knows about from your job. Pay council tax for housing. There's way more than I'm naming. If you just look into it, there's way more than that. The government is stealing all this. Taxation is theft. All of this money is something the government has not worked to achieve, and it's simply taking from you. And it shouldn't be allowed to take from you, because no person is above another person. The government has become a slave master because it takes taxes from the public who have earned that money via trade. The government does not trade and does not generate its own wealth. The same for the military, the same for the police, the same for any job that is essentially a government job that is paid for via taxation, like things like hospitals, I assume lifeguards, and I'm not sure about post office. I'd have to look into it. I thought maybe post office, but post office, they do run their own shops, so they are actually generating their own wealth in that way. So you can't 100% say post office, even if they do receive any tax money. Tax money does go to certain jobs, I wouldn't call them jobs, fully to pay for them, whereas in some other cases it might be partial, in which case that's fine because the job has the ability to generate its own wealth, and I would consider it an actual job. Like a policeman is not a job. A member of the military, sorry guys, it's not a job. Those particular professions are very bad. Friends don't let friends become cops because they're paid for almost entirely, pretty much entirely, I would say, via taxes. And the actual purpose of their job is not to help the public. They have no duty of care to the public. That was shown in America in the past few years. That was proved, but we should have known it anyway. They do not generate their own wealth via trade. They get their wealth via taxes. You know, what does a policeman sell to you? What does a member of the military sell to you? It's using money. Like a member of the military, a soldier in a foreign country is paid via the government. It's not out there making money. They're busy at war. They're not like out there trading or anything. They're just supplied with resources and anything. But the actual purpose of their job is to do what the government tells them, and the end purpose of police and army's job, I like to call them state officers, is to defend the government from the public via wage payment of the taxes that are stolen from the public. So it's a sort of circular, if you can imagine that. I'd have to describe it a bit better, but it's a circular thing where the public are paying. They're not paying for their obstacle to stop the government. They're having it just taken from them by force. They take the money they have earned is taken from them by force to pay for the force. It's like that, basically.
I think there's a previous discussion about dollarization. Actually, strictly speaking, it's to get rid of the central bank. The dollarization is an instrumental issue at the end of the day. There are four argumentative axes. One has to do with a moral issue, which is that stealing is wrong, and seigniorage is nothing more or less than a swindle by politicians against good people. Therefore, let's say if we consider that stealing is wrong, one of the greatest thieves in the history of mankind is the central bank. The second point has to do with a technical issue, because in the Argentine case, it is more evident when a product has no demand, its price is zero. So, if the local currency has no demand, and its price should be zero, the equilibrium real balances are zero. Whatever amount of money a central bank wishes to impose, the counterpart is that the price level is infinite. Demand and its price should be zero. Equilibrium, real balances are zero. Whatever amount of money a central bank wants to impose, the flip side is that the price level has infinity.
And what do you do with the central bank? Would you close it? At one point you made the joke that you were going to set it on fire.
Well, what you do with the building is a problem of what you decide to do with it. It's a figure, it's a metaphor. What I'm saying is that the institution doesn't exist anymore.
Javier Milei, I saw something worrying where someone posted a thing where he met Bill Clinton. Now, that's worrying because Bill Clinton is a far-left Democrat. He's got things like the Clinton Foundation. He's obviously directly tied to his wife, Hillary Clinton, who is, the kind of nemesis of Trump, who was a funny buffoon, but, at the time I was pro-Trump. During the time the far-left went screeching about him, that was mainly due to things like Trump derangement syndrome, like all these people were demonizing this funny guy who's just bumbling along and not doing what a normal president does. I've come to realize after 2020 lockdowns and things with Operation Warp Speed and all that, like the vaccine mandates and vaccine rollout, that Trump is, anyone at the top of a state, including Milei, is essentially, they'd be the enemy of an AnCap or a Libertarian, because there's not meant to be anyone in that slave master position stealing taxes from you and ruling over you via that position of force. So Trump may be a funny bumbling buffoon, but he is, if he becomes president again, and when he was president, he's in a position of power, he's stealing taxes from you, he's doing all the bad things that all the other far left people in his position would do, except slightly milder. Same with the Conservative Party in the UK, they're essentially blue socialists. And we shouldn't have someone at the top doing that. People should be free to govern themselves, and that would be freedom. And at the point when you remove government, you actually have capitalism, which is unregulated trade, essentially. Supply and demand. People trading freely without regulation. You can't do that when there's a government in place, because the government regulates the market. I would say you can't have capitalism widespread in the scenario of having a government, but you can have capitalism in pockets. Say if you had a black market, which is a free market, you're essentially selling things illegally, because you're selling and trading things, you're buying and selling things, but you're not regulating them how the government wants you to regulate them, because it's an illegal market, so you're just selling immediately, directly, without the middleman, to the public, which is capitalism. That's what we all want. But because you're doing it that way, it's illegal. And the government and the far left will make up loads of excuses why regulation of products and how you sell them is a good or important thing, but it's not. And there are tons of AnCap arguments and libertarian arguments against regulating the trade of products. What's the other thing there? There was another thing there, yes. The other way you can have a capitalism transaction under a government is secretly between two individuals. And that would be like, if I paint your fence, neighbour, you can give me some of your apples from your apple tree. That's that. You know, the government can't see that. You don't record that. You don't document that. You don't tell the government you've done that. They can't see that you've done it. You don't have to put any regulations on that transaction. Like, oh, you can only sell a certain amount of apples and only if they're in good health, or you can only build the fence so high, or paint it a certain shade of colour, or use a certain chemical paint to paint the fence, but not other chemical paints. Like, government can't do any of that. It's a straight transaction. I'm going to paint your fence. You're going to give me the apples. Government can't tax it. Government can't step in, can't regulate it, can't do anything. That is capitalism. So you've got secret trade between individuals, and you've got black markets. Otherwise, there is no capitalism. All trade is regulated. So if you buy something from a supermarket, that's not a black market. You're working under socialism or a mixed economy, which is socialism. What we have right now is a mixed economy, which is like a mixture of capitalism and socialism, which is, it boils down to socialism. Because what is capitalism? Unregulated trade. What is socialism? Fully regulated, state-regulated trade. The state controls everything about what you buy and sell. What's a mixture of state controlling everything about trade and unregulated trade? Well, it's still regulated trade. So it's not capitalism. So a mixed economy of socialism and capitalism is still a socialistic economy, and that's what we live under. Say when you go to the supermarket and you buy some bread, or if you try and buy a car, or you try and get a flat or a house, you do anything out in the world here with your money that isn't in a black market or secretly between you and your neighbour or your friend or something, you're not in capitalism. There's no such thing as a capitalist country where there is a government. So I don't know what Javier Milei was doing meeting Bill Clinton. I did see anti-lockdowner Twitter acquaintance, person that I know, posted a thing saying that Javier met Bill Clinton, and at first I thought, oh my god, Javier Milei met Bill Clinton? What the fuck is doing? I post like a disappointment meme sort of thing. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Why would you, if you're so proclaiming to be anti-socialist and anti-communist, why are you meeting with this known socialist Democrat tied to Hillary Clinton? And it's like, is he going to defend himself? I thought at first. I thought, has he got an excuse? I thought, has he gone to sit down with this guy? Because there were photos of them together. Has he gone to sit down with this guy to hang out with him? Or has he gone to sit down with this guy because Bill Clinton's having second thoughts and he's interested about AnCapism? I thought, has he gone to sit down with this guy? That last one's very unlikely, by the way. To tell him to fuck off, like, as Milei sitting down next to him, tell him to get fucked, and like a deal was asked by Bill Clinton and Milei went, no, fuck off. Do we have to think of this more in terms of freedom of association? Like, the left would call you like Nazi adjacent or far right adjacent if you were photographed in the same room as someone who was like, let's say a conservative, like a strong conservative or something, because they don't know what far right is, to be honest. In which case you fight back against that, because it's like, no, you don't have the same views as the people who you talk to. You can talk to someone who's the enemy, sort of thing. You can talk to someone from an opposing ideology from you. People used to do it all the time back in the 20th century and before that. It doesn't mean because you're pictured next to them that you agree with their views. So should we think of it in terms of that? The thing is, they're all on a TV show kind of smiling together as if they're buddying up. And the thing is, we also don't know, and it's annoying not knowing. Like, you say all the anti-socialist things and say you're an AnCap, and then suddenly photos come out with you meeting Bill Clinton. Like, instantly you're kind of like Does he realize Bill Clinton's a leftist? You're kind of tarring yourself to your fans and the people who've just started following you because they thought, oh, this amazing anti-communist, this is going to be great. Oh, hold on, he's fucking meeting a communist. he's meeting a lefty Democrat, and it's like, surely tons of people are noticing this and going, it seems a bit of a contradiction, isn't it? Unless we know the context of this meeting, or if he defends himself, it's kind of a bit contradictory. Then another thought occurred to me in the past few days. Bill Clinton looked quite young in these photos. I'm not quite sure if he's looking quite young these days, or there's another eventuality. Are these photos, they weren't date stamped? Are they from way back in Javier Milei's career? In which case, he might have met Bill Clinton when he was younger, and these are just photos from that meeting. So, is it recent? That's a problem I have with a lot of stuff on Twitter. Like, is the video, or social media anyway, is the video that someone's posting of an event real? In terms of, is it recent? Is it faked? Is it from another time? Is it from another place? Like, you see the news stories and they use photographs from some war event in the 1970s, and then they use it as a background to their headline about a war that's going on right now. And some people point it out and go, dude, this isn't Palestine, this is the Vietnam War or something. And it's like, there are fake videos as well. There's something I think called Pallywood, where people will use film makeup effects to create dead body mannequins that are really realistic, and they'll actually put this into propaganda and use it as like war propaganda. Or they'll use crisis actors, which is like they'll use one particular random screaming Indian woman who looks really sad, and they'll use her as someone in the war in Palestine, what do you want to call it, war in Israel, war in Palestine, that one. And then the next week you'll see that same woman in an article, header photo or a video, screaming and crying, and they're saying this is in the Ukraine-Russia war. And you're like, hold on a sec, some people notice that's the same woman. What's going on here? That's the same girl. That's the exact same person. And in some cases they'll be wearing the same clothes as well. But the news article will just say it's this war. And then the different news article will say, well, no, it's actually this war. Yeah, and Pallywood is like the more crisis actor stuff. It's like the dead bodies are mannequins made up, and it's like 53 children killed in earthquake, 53 children killed in the Palestine-Israel war. And they're just there. You think it's like a horrible photo of like dead bodies, but it's actually a rubber mannequin made up with Hollywood techniques to look like an actual person who's died in a gruesome way. It's like horror makeup effects essentially from films employed against the public in real life as propaganda. This actually happens, and the way they found out that those are mannequins is that some random person was filming on their mobile phone as like a woman's like painting these corpses and stuff, and like they paint on like makeup, and they're like, why is this woman doing that? And it's like, it's not an actual corpse, it's they've created this object to use however they want. They've created this like fake rubber dead child. And it's so sick, but it actually does happen. So, and then there's deep fakes, you know. Is what we see real on Twitter, you know, Javier Milei meeting Bill Clinton, is that a deep fake? I don't believe that's a deep fake, but in some situations, especially with Biden, you wonder if certain bits of video are actual deep fakes of him. Because some of them do look slightly uncanny valley, which is slightly dodgy, slightly like, is this actually a human I'm watching, or is it a bit of CGI pretending to be a human? Like, watch the film Tron Legacy and they make one of the actors younger in that film. It doesn't look quite right, you know, you can tell it's not a real person, or it's the real person with CGI over him, you know. I think that was a video of Javier Milei meeting Bill Clinton. I don't think it was a deep fake, but I think in the past few days I was thinking, Bill Clinton's looking very young in that. Did he meet Javier earlier in his career when this was all different? And none of this stuff has happened, and he wasn't announcing that he was an AnCap. He was just going around certain circles in politics, making a name for himself early on. So that's one thing. Also, people were saying that Javier Milei had links to the World Economic Forum. His mugshot face, like Trump and like Putin, like everyone really, and it's very strange, is on the World Economic Forum website. They put faces of politicians on there, just so many of them. But I think it's like, I don't know, they put faces of the politicians on who have just attended their conferences or something. It's starting to seem like. It used to be that we all thought they were just like people directly involved with the World Economic Forum, because the WEF themselves said they like groomed world leaders to do what they wanted, and there is no evidence better than the Build Back Better line from The Great Reset, which is Klaus Schwab's book. His book is The Great Reset, which is also his plan for the world, which also mixes with UN Agenda 2021 and 2030. Those are all one thing. His motto for the book was Build Back Better, and during lockdowns, suddenly all the fucking world leaders were saying Build Back Better at the same time. Too much coincidence. Far too much. That was like a big kind of red pill sort of moment for me. And so Javier Milei's mugshot is on the World Economic Forum's website, and people were going, oh, he's a member of the WEF, you can't trust him, he's a member of the WEF. And I was still in a positive mind about Milei, and someone released a thing explaining this and defending it, and that was Javier Milei did in the past attend a World Economic Forum conference, and apparently he argued for libertarian economics, and he told them to go fuck themselves, and he left the conference like that, and he was never invited to attend the conference again for the World Economic Forum.
Of the potential for growing your firm or the rest of the society, where are the skill shortages?
In general, when one talks about the Argentinian case, what one finds is that there are very capable people that when they go out of the country are very successful, but however, locally speaking, they might fail. And so there are some issues. For example, the first one has to do with the role of public education. For example, when one sees the result, you find that every time the formation or the training from the private sector is most important. For example, the first myth that needs to be corrected is for the public sector to say that's not true, that's false. For example, the private sector in education generates what the market demands. However, the public sector, as its sustainability and results, do not depend on how successful they are in the placing of professionals in the market. They dedicate to the formation of professionals that live outside of the scheme of reality. A good example, for instance, in the case of Argentina, we can say it's of our Minister of Economy. We have an economist who has graduated with honors, with all of the honors, but with a Marxist profile. And 4 years ago, the economy has not launched out with the best performances in its history or with the best exchange history. An economy that has to have been growing at 7, 8, or 9% is currently debating on if it's not or if it is in crisis. So depending on the needs of the market and what the market dictates, well, clearly it's satisfied by the private sector. And so there is an issue of how the system generates the signals and how it internalizes it and produces what the market wants. And so I think that it's an interesting point, especially, Ricardo, when you were talking about the case in Brazil and the comparison with what England was and its equivalent. We have to consider if the education that we are generating is an education of quality, because you can have many years of schooling and nonetheless you don't have good output. Why? Because the trainers are not good. Who the trainers are? Because you can generate a great university full of Marxists, and when you prepare a Minister of Economy, then it's going to have a different impact to the economy in the country.
So I was like, oh, okay, that could be true, and I lean towards that. That could be a true thing that's happening. So it's an interesting topic. He says he's an AnCap. He even at one point is like holding up the AnCap flag, like, look, check this out. The black means anarchy. The gold, the yellow means gold, like the power of money, solid money that can't be tampered with. And yeah, if just watch some videos on Milei Explains Twitter, and you can see his policies. And he does know a lot of libertarian thought. He does know what he's talking about, but he is a head of state, so it's an interesting topic. I'm not going to say I'm a Javier Milei supporter in the same way as I won't 100% say I'm a Trump supporter, or like I was partially in the past just because of what was going on at the time. Now I'm like kind of the opposite of that, but not in a derangement way like a leftist where I'd go, Trump's a Nazi. I don't think Trump's a Nazi. I don't think Trump's done bad stuff in the way the left think he's done bad stuff. I think he's done bad stuff like being pro-lockdown and being a piece of the state apparatus. So, you know, I'm not going into hero worship. I will say Javier Milei, in the same way as Trump, is very funny. The Afuera video, and just when he does do sensible and calm interviews. I watched an interview he had with Tucker Carlson where it was all translated on either side. And it was very calm and like sensible. So people at first we thought his personality was that aggressive, passionate, like "Viva Liberty!" Like, was it "Viva la Libertad" or whatever it is in Argentinian, like screaming at the camera and going, "These shit leftists." Like, can you? It's my favourite bit in that video is like the woman he's interviewed by on TV is like, "You say shit leftists. Can you define a shit leftist?" And he's like, "I say it because they're shit." And she's like, "What? Why are they shit?" He's like, "Because they are shit." That's such a hilarious video. And then he goes into passionate kind of rants that are quite smart, but like aggressively delivered, and it's like this is awesome. And he's in like videos on the high street. He's like going to cosplayer conventions and like taking photos with like young adults and stuff in like costumes. And then at one point he's dressed up as like General AnCap. He's got the AnCap flag, but it's a costume, and he's got a staff. It's hilarious. And he's like in another like crowd photo, he's waving a chainsaw in the air, and that's like, that hints that he's gonna arm the public. Like, you should be free to own a chainsaw, you should be free to own tanks, F-15s, ICBMs, as long as you can pay for it. You got a nuclear ICBM at the bottom of the garden. This is kind of libertarian thought. I'm not going to explain that. If you know, you know. But, you know, ever since lockdowns, I completely understood what the Second Amendment in America was about. I completely understood. I became pro-gun in that moment. That I saw, like, police just busting into people's houses and going, "You can't be in your own garden. You can't sit in your own house drinking wine with your best friend." Like, are you fucking kidding me? They were, like, trying to pull a child away from their parents over, like, masks or vaccines or something, and they were forcing kids to get vaccines in schools and coercing. It was the worst thing that's happened in my life. Was not like September 11th, was not like the Iraq War, was not like the Afghan War on Terror. It was the lockdowns in 2020. I've never seen a more nightmarish thing happen in this country or in the world than that. I'm not going to say even more so than the feminism and the leftism that came before it, because it is the feminism and the leftism. It is the socialism. So anyway, Milei's a funny guy. He's not an AnCap. I would say he's a Catholic conservative who says a lot of cool libertarian and AnCap stuff. But he's a member of state, so he's like a conservative. I have hopes for him if he takes away the apparatus of government, takes away taxes and arms the people. It's happening in Argentina, so it doesn't really concern us, other than thinking about the Falklands and whether they should get another vote, whether they want to join Argentina. I would probably say yes at this point. Look at what Britain's doing compared to what Argentina's doing. Just Suddenly the Falklands would probably become Argentinian, I think, if they had the vote again. I have interesting hopes for the guy, but at the same time I'm skeptical, and he might be a Trump-like figure, and if he holds on to power and stuff, and if he doesn't end up doing things to the government, it will tar the name of AnCaps in one way and libertarians, because people will think this is what AnCaps and libertarianism is if he stays in power, and that's not what it is. So I need to make it clear to everyone, Javier Milei is not an AnCap, but he has a path to it if he plays his cards right. Thank you for watching.
¡Afuera! Ministerio de Cultura, ¡afuera! Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, ¡afuera! Aunque te resistas. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
Pero ¿me podés definir zurdo de mierda que no?
Todos los que, digamos, los colectivistas, los que ponen, digamos, o sea, esa idea... A ver,
¿Por qué le pones de mierda, digamos?
porque son una mierda.